Hi, my name is Shintaro Kanaoya. I'm doing a talk about indies getting into Asia, apparently. So this is primarily directed towards indie developers. So if you're not an indie developer or you're not interested in, this talk is going to be very boring. It might be boring anyway, but you're here. So anyway, oh, do I have a clicker? Is this a clicker? What's this? Is that a clicker? Is a clicker? Oh yeah, back and it's very difficult, isn't it? Right, I guess I better move this out of the way. That's all right, Chris. No, you sit there. Don't trouble yourself. Jesus Christ. I have a small company called Chorus Worldwide. We're a 3-person company. For reasons of passing understanding, I'm based in Vancouver, but I have a company that primarily does Western games to Asia. It's very complicated. And then I have 2 guys working for me in Japan, Fuzuki, who's our COO, who handles mostly production stuff, and Ryuji, who's our PR guy. The key thing about this, we're all really old. We're old men that have been working in games for far too long, and it kind of colors the kind of stuff we do, the games we look for, and everything that we do, basically. So like I said, founded in 2014, published, I think, 16 games to date, 15 on mobile. Yeah, basically what it says there. So this is some of the games that we've done over the last few years. Probably the biggest one that you may or may not have heard of is The Room and The Room 2. Worked with a Russian publisher called Alawar for Goblin Defenders, Calypso on Crown Takers, and then a bunch of kind of indie titles down here. And this is our first Switch game that we did last year. And we're publishing more console stuff and PC stuff this year. So I guess we're now officially multi-platform-y, whatever. So in terms of what we look for, and the reason I mention this is just because our focus is broad on Asia, shallow but broad. So we don't focus on Japan or Korea or China. We kind of go, we try to give a pathway for predominantly indies to reach those markets in a relevant and meaningful way into those areas. But it's not like we can say, right, we're going to spend a huge amount in one particular territory. So we're more kind of broad and shallow rather than narrow and deep, I guess. So in terms of kind of what we look for, we first and foremost look for Western games that are unique. So if there's another Match 3 or another RTS that's otherwise pretty generic, we tend not to do those. And part of the reason for that is we want things that kind of stand out on their own, and games that an Asian developer, Japanese developer, or Korean developer would not make or would not be able to make because they're culturally different. Part of the reason for that is we like those kinds of games, but the other reason is it stands out. So if we were to take a Japanese developed game and go, here we go, Japan, it's like, well, there's thousands of them. What we look for something like The Room, no Japanese developer, I would say, would ever have been able to develop that game just because of how it worked culturally and the background of it. So we look for stuff that can stand out on its own. Primarily gameplay driven. So we're not really about huge amounts of, I guess, grinding. We like gameplay type stuff. Like I said, part of the reason for the hello. Part of the reason. Can you hear me now? Could you not hear me until now? I've just been doing that for the last 10 minutes. So we're primarily gameplay. I'm really conscious about this now. Hello? I'm good. A mic, did you say? Sorry. It's just a bit inappropriate on stage, Chris. Thank you, though.
That's a bit.
I don't care.
Is that all right? It's a bit. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. So we primarily look for gameplay-driven things, again, because just that's what we want to do. We want to get games that are out there. And find ways to say mobile games especially aren't just about another free-to-play grind mechanic. Nothing wrong with that, and obviously there's a place for that. That's just not what we're about, and we're trying to create our own niche for that. And like I say, multi-platform is something that we're starting to do at the moment. So one of the things I guess I wanted to kind of impart is just a little bit about Asia. So you guys will obviously know this, and from the previous talk, China. But 3 of the top 5 grossing markets in the world are in Asia. So to say, okay, we don't really know what we're going to do in Asia, we haven't thought about it, it's worse than ignoring the US or Europe. It's that big. but what we're finding is that there's kind of less and less crossover between the three markets. So the idea of Asia as a whole, as a market, is not the case, I guess. So to kind of illustrate that, this is, you can't see this at all, can you? But anyway, this US, UK, and France top 20 top grossing from, I think, a week ago. And I just wanted to have a look at this to see how homogenous is the market. And so if you, of these 60 slots, there are 32 unique games. Right, so all of these appear in one or more, 19 games appear in one or more of those three markets. And I'm sure you're familiar with most of them. If you look at Asia, so China, Japan, and Korea, of these 60 slots, there are 58 unique titles. So there's almost zero crossover. There's only 2 titles that appear in more than one app store. And kind of the point of this is just to say that if you think about Asia, then there's no such thing. Is that in terms of app stores and certainly the top area, there's 3 very distinct markets. And so if you want to tailor a game for a particular market, then choose a market, because you're going to be doing very different things depending on which one you want to go for. So, like I said, there's obviously unique stores. Apart from the Apple App Store and Google Play, there's things like Japanese mobile carrier subscriptions, which, if any of you know Amazon Underground, it's like a Netflix for games things. You put them on those channels. If they accept you, then you get paid as a developer, depending on installs or time played. Subscribers pay about $20, $25 a month to get a range of games and apps that they can use. And that's quite a good secondary channel that we found recently. And obviously, China Android stores, there's just far too many to mention, but it's just a quick kind of idea about, it's not just about the App Store, it's not just about Google Play, there are a lot of other channels out there in Asia. So what does this all mean? This is silly, really, but if you want to go into Asia and have big success, you need to create a massive F2 free-to-play RPG, battle, casual license puzzle game, sign a massive deal with each of either Tencent or Aniplex, that's not supposed to say Aniplex, Mixi, or Nexon, and then culturalize with deep, deep understanding of each specific market, because they're all very different, and then just sit back and count all your money. It's not possible, because you're indies. So this is all about, well, okay, so if you're an indie, you've got a 2-person, 3-person, 5-person studio, how the hell do you even think about Asia? So, excuse me. There's a couple of things. So my company is on the left. This is kind of what we try and do, is think about for a small company, what's the best way commercially, creatively, as a partner, we can work with people that are often cash-strapped or resource-strapped, but just really have a great game that they want to make. They want to get out into Asia in some manner, but they don't have the ability to sit down with Tencent. They don't have the ability to create a massive live ops team. So someone like us, I guess the advantages are that we can get you out into more than one marketplace at the same time. We have enough knowledge of those local markets to get you into there. So as well as the App Store and Google Play, which anyone can get onto by yourselves, we've managed to get games onto some of the Chinese Android stores. We've got games onto the Japanese telco subscription channels. High quality localization, which I'll come on to later. Things like customer support and PR and etc. Everything that publishers do. Disadvantages, people like us have less reach. Going back to the earlier point, if you want to go to China, then go to China with a particular massive Chinese partner. If you want to go to Japan, do that. If you want to just reach all of them in some way, then someone like us will work, but we don't have the reach of someone like Tencent. It would be lovely, maybe one day. The go it alone route, obviously the advantages are you don't have to pay anyone. There's no rev share involved. You can learn about each of those regions as you go into them, and you control your own costs. So you just treat it like any other territory you would launch into. Disadvantages, obviously, it's hard to localize effectively if you don't know what you're doing. It can cost you time and resource, and not having local relationships with partners or stores is going to miss you free opportunities that are invaluable to especially indies. I don't know if you remember this guy, Donald Rumsfeld, from a few years ago. back when things were more sane, even this guy was better. But he had this great quote about known unknowns and known knowns and stuff like that. Does anyone know this? Okay. So the key point I wanted to illustrate was he didn't come up with it, I guess. I'm sure Trump came up with it. But the idea of unknown unknowns, things you don't know that you don't know. And a lot of times with, doing something as simple as localization, people think that they've localized something and they don't even know that they've made a mistake because they think they've done it right. And there's a couple of funny examples that I will go through. So localization, first of all, it's called Google Translate and not Google Localize, and that's really key. If you just put it into Google Translate and you think you've got a Japanese version or a Chinese version, you don't. You have something very basic that probably doesn't even make sense. So some of the common mistakes we see are non-native translators just using wrong language. It's not the right language for a game. Over-translation, so something like in Japan especially, you'll see people translate player one or ready or start. Leave those in English, but you wouldn't know that if you're not a native Japanese gamer. So things like that are kind of important. Cultural faux pas, probably the worst one we've ever seen is a company asked us to look at a fantasy role-playing game, and one of the translators they'd used had translated the word dwarf. Is anyone Japanese speaker here? Anyone? Oh, one. Okay. So they translated it as kobito. And so basically it's not a word that's used anymore, it's a derogatory term. And also for a fantasy role-playing game, dwarf is just dwarf. That's the name of that character. So, but obviously the original developer didn't know that that was wrong. How would they? They don't speak the language. So stuff like that, common mistakes like that are really important to try and avoid, because otherwise you're going to go into a market and you're going to be creating all sorts of problems for yourself, and you're going to have customer support issues you can't read about a problem you don't understand. So one of the issues with, I guess, bad localization. Yeah, so known unknowns, unknown unknowns. So this is one of my favorite examples from one of our own games. This is a game called The Adventures of Bertram Fiddle. There was this clock appears, and you click on it, and the character says, in English, "My grandfather had a massive clock." Now, for most native English speakers, you understand that's a joke. If you just translated that into any language, it would read, "My grandfather had a massive clock." And as a player, you're thinking, does that mean I need to find my grandfather? Do I need a key for it? His clock it's a point-and-click adventure. So not just translating it is one thing, but making sure that there's a joke in there and making sure that players understand this isn't important. Click on it, laugh at it, move on. Don't spend the next hour looking for a grandfather clock key. We managed to get a translator who translated into, this is just for you, I guess, Jijue no mono bura bura yurete tayo. So I thought you'd like that, Chris. So we managed to make a penis joke in Japanese, which I'm quite proud of. I can die happy. But again, it's an important one, because humor is a big part of this game, and if it's a big part of your game, then you want to make sure that that translates, and you want to make sure that you're not sending players up the wrong road. Culturalization. So usually refers to art, and this is probably the hardest ones for indies, because you might think, okay, well, we're going to change everything to anime. Well, that's probably not the right idea, because you probably don't know what you're doing, and even then it's different between countries. So if you don't have that skill set, don't do it. It doesn't make any sense for you to do that. But characters are the biggest one. So another example from one of our games, we had this game called Kitty Powers Matchmaker, which loved the game. It's a dating game. We showed it to a few people at the Tokyo Game Show a few years ago, and everyone enjoyed the game, hated the characters, absolutely despised this look, and multiple reasons. But because of that, they just couldn't get into the idea of it. So we were lucky enough to get the artist from a game called Hatoful Boyfriend, and she liked the game, and she redid the characters for us. And I'm not saying this is amazing, but what this achieved was people didn't have that initial reaction was, "Ugh, I don't want to play this game." They at least gave it a chance. So that kind of like cultural barrier, you might not even know. You might think, what's wrong with this? This is colorful, it's fun, it's kind of anime. What's wrong with that? This got a very bad reaction from fans. So again, it's one of those things, if you're there, if you're in the local market, and this wasn't, funnily enough, we weren't even showing the game at the Tokyo Game Show. We were showing another game, and we had this in development, and we just asked a few people, what do you think of this one? And that's where we got that reaction from. So it's useful just if you're there, just to figure out, okay, maybe this is going to work, maybe it's not. I'm not going to talk about this very much, but it's, well, interestingly, based on what David, I guess, and Peter were saying, the premium stuff is getting more interesting, I think, especially in China. In Japan, it's still pretty tough to have a paid game. So if you're making a premium game, think about ways that you can make it, just convert that little thing in the iTunes store from a number to the word get. What can you do to that? So we've done, for The Room, which is a premium game, we turned it into a free-to-download game. So it's free. After Chapter 1, you monetize and you buy the rest of the game. And that's worked quite well for us. So it's just, I guess people don't want to pay a cover charge to get into a nightclub anymore. You want to at least go in, figure out whether you like the place, and then buy a drink. That's what we found over there is people they're not taking the time to understand whether they want to make a purchase decision. They'd rather just download. And this isn't that different from the West. So think about opportunities outside the App Store. Like I said, numerous third-party. There's a screen just there. I just noticed that for the first time. Numerous third-party Android stores in China, subscription offerings. There are more than just the App Store and Google Play. Obviously, all of that stuff takes time to build those relationships, but they are very, very valuable. Funnily enough, having David Helgeson on here before, if you're making a game on Unity, think about, can you get the game out onto other platforms? Maybe there is a way, even if you're making a hardcore mobile game, or if you're making a console game, is there a way that you can convert that somehow into a mobile game or other platforms? And finally, I guess there's only one really surefire way that I've seen that, as an indie, you can make a game that you don't really have to worry about culturally, where it's targeting. You don't have to worry about premium or free-to-play. The only thing that I've seen that works is make something unique. Make something genuinely interesting and different. And this is the barrier, the financial barrier is pretty low. The creative barrier is massively high for all of these games. To come up with something so bizarre and so unique that people just have to look at it is a hard ask. But at the same time, if you're an indie and you're out there making a game and you're not aspiring to make something that you want to make a statement about or something different, what are you in the business for? Right? Because I don't think we need another Match 3 or whatever. So each of these games, localization might be a little rough, or they might not be doing much promotion in different countries, but they all succeed because they are something that is so different that people can't help but look at them. I mean, this is my current favorite, the Getting Over It one on mobile. It's doing phenomenally well in Japan, and it makes no sense, but it's a wonderful, wonderful game. So if you can push yourself creatively, and that is, to me, I think that's less risky now than trying to be conservative in your game design, than push yourself, and then at least there's a chance, maybe, of getting out there. I think that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic.
I don't have a thank you slide.